Hello, I'm Martijn Graat and this is Does Logistics Matter? A podcast on trends and innovations in supply chain and logistics. Answering yes to the question today is Gert-Jan Jansen, founder and CEO of Rotate. In this episode we talk about the current state of the air freight industry, how to prevent death by dashboard, the importance of actionable data, and how to improve day-to-day commercial decision-making.
Gert-Jan, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, the first thing, well, I always start with the same first question, but I'm going to address something else first today. Your name, which is Gert-Jan. My name is Martijn. We are both Dutch and have very Dutch names. Now, my name translates pretty easily into Martin, which is usually how I'm called when I go abroad. But, how do people handle Gert-Jan?
Yeah. Well, hey, first I wish if my parents would have realized how much travel I would do in my life, I would hope they would have given me a different name. But, and so, yeah, when I introduce myself, I always wonder, like, what should I do? Should I say, my name is Gert-Jan, or should I say, my name is Gert-Jan, or, something like that? And I always choose to say, my name is Gert-Jan, because otherwise I'm gonna assume that the conversation partner is not able to pronounce Gert-Jan, and I would rather not. So I'm keeping it at Gert-Jan, but I listen to Gert-Jan Jansen in Japan. So
Mooi,
all sorts
Jansen.
of ways of doing that.
Nice. Okay. So then we come to the first question of the podcast, which is always, does logistics matter?
Yeah, Martijn, and maybe for this purpose, when coming here by train this morning, I realized that looking at your history of all the podcasts that you do, yes, logistics matters, but to me it was sort of surprising that air cargo was actually not sort of a major component of the series so far. And so I would say, yeah, logistics matters, but for the sake of this one, maybe we rebranded it as air cargo matters, because that's the part of logistics that I think that I know quite a bit of.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And as we just already mentioned, and I think that it's a number that many people will know, but 35% of global trade by value travels by air. And retail, commerce, manufacturing without air cargo, is nowhere. And so, yeah, it is indeed true when you read about logistics or when you hear about logistics. It's a lot about trucking. It's a lot about last mile. It's a lot about warehousing, supply chain. But hey, air cargo is such a critical component of that entire supply chain which really matters. So glad that I got this opportunity to talk a little bit about the topic with you today.
Well, you're right, Gert-Jan. Air freight definitely has not had the attention it deserved in the podcast. My own experience is in warehousing, and I've dealt with different modalities across my logistics career. Air freight hasn't been one of them, so maybe that's the reason. How did you end up in logistics? And especially, let me say, how did you up in air freight? Or did you start in air freight, or did you start in logistics and then discovered air freight?
It's like many things in life. It's pure coincidence, I guess. I've studied industrial engineering and management science in Eindhoven.
Yeah.
So I was into numbers and mathematics and statistics and all of that. And I had a graduation project at KLM, Cargo.
Ah, okay.
I had to do I was building a forecasting system for air cargo bookings 25 years ago. Maybe longer. 30 years ago.
Yeah, okay.
and so after a very brief stay in KLM, I went to a small Dutch consulting company, but together with myself, two other people from KLM Cargo left. So we started with the three of us. We got a cargo consulting project. We got another cargo consulting project. And before you know, you have a cargo consulting practice. And that's what I've been doing since.
Yeah. So you've been advising air freight companies on all sorts of matters, strategic, tactical.
Yeah.
Can you give some examples?
Yeah,
Of the
I
types or
can't mention names.
No,
but
no,
sort
no.
of the two biggest things are airlines, indeed. And I was doing a count for another purpose this week. I think that I've helped close to 40 airlines, indeed, with strategy-related questions. And in terms for airlines, it often has to do with what aircraft should we fly, how many freighters should we have, what network should we do, partnerships, does it make sense, should we invest, divest, but also much more tactical topics like how to earn more from the fleet and the network that we have.
Yeah.
Do we have the right pricing? Do we have the right revenue management? How should we improve that? So that's much of the things that I've done for airlines. And then airports and governments is also one of the key things.
Yep.
I've been helping the governments of Singapore, Hong Kong, well, actually also Schiphol in the past, with cargo strategies for the airports, and for instance for Singapore, for the country.
Yeah, I guess we could say that you are a air freight specialist then. Yeah. What I've one of the things that I discovered about air freight in the past years, and I had no idea about this, but that quite a large percentage of air freight is not transported by air freighters. So a lot of the cargo goes into the is a belly hold the right word, into the belly hold of passenger aircraft, which made the whole situation for air freight very interesting. To say it lightly, when COVID hit and suddenly passenger aircraft were all grounded. I mean, they were actually converting. I've seen pictures of boxes being strapped into regular seats in passenger aircraft to use them as freighters because there was not enough capacity.
Yeah, true. Yeah, traditionally, so pre-COVID, the mix was a little bit 50-50. So 50% of the cargo would fly in the bellies of the passenger aircraft.
Yeah.
And 50% would fly in dedicated freighter aircraft. So yeah, indeed, when you take 50% of the capacity out, then you have a problem, which is for a very large part behind, the surges in yields and prices that we have seen in the last so many years. But thankfully thankfully, different people will have different opinions on that. Yeah. But thankfully, things have normalized quite a bit since then. But no, indeed.
And has there always been, supply and demand of air freight capacity, is that always a pretty balanced thing, or are there huge swings in supply and demand?
Yeah, well, no, over a long period of time, demand and supply, if you would look at the growth factors of both, over a long period of time, both of them will almost by design be roughly equal. But it's the price that will adjust for the underlying differences. Yeah. So take COVID. I mean, if you look at the period of COVID, well, COVID is slightly different, but even in COVID, growth of demand, growth of supply, overall is fairly stable. Typically aircrafts are full.
Yeah.
But there was much more underlying demand, which is why prices would go up.
Yes.
At times, and let's say in a time period that we're now entering, when the underlying demand is less than capacity, then prices will go down. So overall, demand and supply will balance out, but it's the price that will fluctuate and that will adjust for the differences, the underlying differences between the two.
Okay. What are some of the other major factors impacting the air freight industry currently?
Well, I think we are at a turning point. Indeed, again, I think it's quite clear that a quite significant long period with elevated prices. Prices are still above what they used to be in 2019, but that has ended. And if you now look at a very long period of time, then air cargo is typically a good predictor for how global economies will develop. So typically cargo goes down before GDP or before general economies in the world will go down. And so if the last few months of your cargo if that's a leading indicator for what the economy is going to do the next half year, that's not good news, because the cargo market has been going down quite substantially. It's going to be interesting to see how it's all going to play out. Unfortunately, I would almost say, memory is not great. So people tend to forget how things used to be, and people, in my opinion at least, too quickly adjust to new normals. They have forgotten that until 2019, cargo was it's a real fun business, and it's a super interesting business, and it's a really critical business for the world. But for an airline, it was like hard work in order to be profitable. And during the COVID period, all of that was gone. Lots of money was made, hugely profitable, and many people, even CEOs that I meet, aren't used to that period before 2019, and they think that there's no limit. So people have been ordering planes in the last many years in numbers where I think like, okay guys, what are we going to do with all these planes in a few years from now? So that's going to be interesting to see how that's going to play out. But going forward, I'm a bit worried. Maybe that's too big of a word, but I'm certainly going to be curious if we are as a whole not going to get too much capacity again, which is going to be problematic for profitability of the entire industry.
How does sustainability tie into this? Because if we look at road freight, we see definitely we see cleaner engines, but we also see hydrogen trucks, we see electric trucks. But I guess, if you look at the large flows of goods, take containers, it's really difficult to make that sustainable, because you can put a battery on a container ship, and I'm guessing that for quite some time in the future, the same problem is there when you look at airplanes.
Yeah, well, I think above all, maybe air cargo as an industry can do a better job in branding what it is doing on sustainability, and I'm not an expert in that. Let me say that for sure. But I am positively surprised about what's happening. And if you look at the new aircraft, they are so much better and more efficient than the aircraft that we used to have. And it doesn't only go for the freighters. So a new generation freighter is hugely more fuel efficient than the freighters that it replaces. But it's also related, for instance, with those belly aircraft, so those passenger aircraft that we're flying in. If you fly in a Dreamliner, a 787, or latest 777, those aircrafts will have much larger cargo capacity below the seats than the aircraft that they replace. So A, the engines are more efficient, but B, we're putting much more cargo in those planes. And with that, the overall implication on environment is also going to be much better than it used to be. There's a increasing amount of attention to it. What we are seeing now is that there's much more interest into it. So the big forwarders, when they are making their capacity purchases, they will certainly look at what is the footprint, what's the carbon efficiency of the different routes that it can take. One of the companies that it's called Cargo AI. It's a sister company to Rotate, of which I'm the CEO. That company is like a booking portal for air cargo booking. So if you're a forwarder, you go check and see if you want to fly from Johannesburg to Tokyo, what are the alternatives? And they will also look at what are the different aircrafts that are being flown on the different stretches, and you will see, okay, I can go for this cheaper flight, but if I'm going to take those cheaper flights, then I'm going to spend 14% more CO2 on the journey. So that, and I'm not saying that likely majority of the forwarders will still pick the cheaper price. But that these things are going to be visible and transparent now is certainly different than a few years ago.
Yeah, and probably over the years to come that will change, right? I mean I think that on the especially on the consumer side, they will demand that companies get more sustainable, and there's a few ways how you can do that. You can make your products more sustainable, but I think it's still about a third of the carbon footprint comes from transporting the goods. So they may well just demand that their stuff, yes, it's coming by plane, but it should come in the cleanest way possible.
Yeah. And again, there's a lot of attention to that. And I'm not the expert, but you can see it. You can see it in what other forwarders are asking. You can see it in, for instance, how KLM, Lufthansa, how they are working on sustainable aviation fuels. There's a lot of activity in that field.
So looking at sustainability, does data and AI does that have a large impact?
Well, data certainly is an interesting topic. Also, certainly for sustainability. But I think it's a bit. The impact of data is a bit should be looked at in a much broader way.
No, obviously.
And I also, that's also one of the things that I at least hope that is going to change, and I'm quite sure that that's going to change in the last few years. And I'm 25 years in the business. If I look at 20 years ago, there was hardly any data. There was no information about. There was hardly any information about markets when airlines were making decisions on routes or planes or networks. They would look at yesterday's load factor and they would make the decision. These days there's so much information available. Either from the market or data that companies have themselves. Through their reservation systems or the booking portals or what have you. But I think that if we're going to be brutally honest, and I don't know if this is, I actually doubt if this is specific only to air cargo. But if you would look at how certainly the air cargo industry is actually using all of that information, that is fairly limited. So there's a lot of data available on everything, including sustainability. There's a lot of data available, but the actual usage of it is not great.
Okay.
What you'll see is that every airline, every forwarder, every airline, the more data, the more dashboards. 5 years ago we were talking about death by PowerPoint. I could argue that these days we have a death by dashboards.
Death by dashboard, nice.
And the bigger the meeting room and the bigger the television screen, the more data is going to be thrown at those screens.
Yeah.
But it totally lacks the so what. So what are we going to do now?
Yeah.
How can we make things better? How can we be more efficient? That is lacking. And I think that is broader for data, sustainability certainly one, but also just general market numbers on prices, yields, load factors, what have you. And I think that that's an opportunity as an industry. We need to do better. You can tie it back to sustainability. You can say, hey, air cargo is required. That's a guarantee as long as we like. To have the fruits that we eat and the flowers at all times of the year when we like the shirts and the fashion and the technology that air cargo is here. Air cargo is important. So then let's all collectively make sure that we do it in the most efficient manner and in the best manner. And that means taking all that data that is available and turning that data into action. So not only looking at it, but actually, make sure that it drives the decision-making processes in the air cargo industry, and that's lacking.
So last week I spoke to two people from the TLN, who is that's the Dutch trade association for the transport and logistics industry, and I spoke to them about data, and especially in the road freight industry, data is extremely fragmented. Also in warehousing. there's many different systems, and every software operator has its own way of processing data and labeling data. And the same goes for all these retail companies that ship all the goods. The same goes for transportation companies that use these systems. Everybody is naming everything something else. How is standardization in data in the air freight industry?
Well, my personal interest and my company's interest is more on the commercial side of things.
Mm-hmm.
So we do a lot of work when it comes to commercial decision making, better pricing, better revenue management, better account management, and again making sure that all the data that is available, that is going to be translated into actions that salespeople can take and that organizations can take. I don't feel that on the commercial side of things, and of course we can always do better, but I think that the challenge on the commercial side of things is more, okay, it may be fragmented, and it may have different names, across different organizations, but it shouldn't be an excuse in order to actually go do something with that stuff that is not being done at the moment. So I think, of course, you can make a wish list of you want to have more data and better data and more real time and even more real time, and that is all true. And I don't think that as an industry, one should stop trying to get to that better data position. But I think it can also be an excuse to not using it for the moment. So on a commercial side, I would say, yeah, of course, there's a wish list, and data and information can always be better.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's more than sufficient data and information available. Let's make sure that is going to be driving actual decision making, as opposed to even larger dashboards and more data being pulled on those. On the operational side, that's a whole different spectrum, but I'm less aware of that. But on the commercial side, I would say, again, there's more than enough to improve decision making. So let's do that.
So how does that work? Do you have some examples of how you can turn data into actionable data?
Yeah. So how airlines typically work is that at a head office level, there's a lot of information, there's a lot of data.
Mm-hmm.
People will have information about the market, about load factors, market sizes, trends, yields, the works.
Yeah.
They will have information as well about the internal operation on load factors and loadings and booking profiles and what have you. And they will, I'm not saying that every airline will do it like this, but they will create huge pivot tables in Excel, and they will send these pivot tables to salespeople around the world and ask them to, hey, here's interesting data, take them to your advantage, do the analysis and go sell stuff differently. That is not going to work. Salespeople are salespeople. And this is a little bit what we mean with turn data into action. The data is there, but what action should we take? And one of the things that we are developing right now is an algorithm whereby we're going to look at all that data, and different from giving a sales guy all that data, we are telling the sales guy like, hey, there should be an opportunity to sell more Kuehne+Nagel on day 4 between Johannesburg and Tokyo, and we would recommend this price. And see it as a one of our clients was jokingly referring it to as Tinder, as sort of Tinder for air cargo, whereby our algorithm is going to generate a lot of sales leads.
Yeah.
And a local sales guy can look at the sales leads, so he will see the actual initiative. He can click on the initiative, or she can click on the initiative, and then we'll see why we think the initiative is what it is, and why it should be day 4, and why it should be Kuehne+Nagel, purely as an example, and why it should be this yield. But it's the other way around. We start with the action, we start with the initiative, and then a sales guy can always, look into the numbers and see whether it makes sense, yes or no. And if it makes sense, it's going to get a, swipe left or swipe right. Don't know which one
Yeah.
the Tinder is, but he likes them or he doesn't.
Yeah.
And also from that action, our algorithms will learn and improve, so that it's going to be able to give better initiatives, over time. But so this is an example of turning the things the other way around. We don't throw data to salespeople, but we wanna show actions, actionable things that someone can do in their day to day.
Yeah, Gert-Jan, I agree when you say that data needs to be more actionable. There's a huge focus on data, and I absolutely love your death by dashboards quote. If we are talking about actionable data, I'm going to ask you actionable advice. Now, what's your actionable advice for, let's say, the CEO of an airline that has a lot of freight to transport, or maybe the CEO of a company that is in need of a lot of air freight?
Yeah. The first example is for me easier to answer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an airline guy. That's, in all fairness, also a little bit more where my sympathy lies. Hey, they run the risk of the assets. So I'm certainly keen to help them. What would I say? I think there's a few things. I think one is I do hope that people remember that looking at capacity in a conservative way
Mm-hmm.
is a smart thing to do. I fear that in the last few years, too many people have thought that air cargo is going to be this new profit center, and that is something that they should invest heavily in new aircraft, for that. And I'm not saying that shouldn't have happened, but being prudent on that capacity investment,
Mm-hmm.
buying new airplanes, I think that's important. So I hope that we're going to keep that discipline. Maybe that's the best word, capacity discipline.
Yeah.
Let's treat it carefully. That's one. And then secondly, for an airline, the commercial side is really important. Many of those organizations are already so lean that there's very few things that can be done.
Mm-hmm.
But on the commercial decision-making, things can be done much better.
Yeah.
As we've discussed, the data is there, the tools are there, solutions are there, providers are there. Make sure that you start using that. It may not be perfect, and we should still continue to shoot for the moon in order to get the perfect information and the perfect solutions and the perfect everything. But for God's sake, let's not stop you from acting right now. Hey, ideally, of course, work with Rotate in order to get solutions and tools that help you do better commercial decision making.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Gert-Jan, for explaining more to me and to the listeners about how air freight works. You said shoot for the moon. Now, there's a lot of space freight initiatives going on. Do you have any ambitions to be a specialist in that as well? Because I guess if it's going to the moon, it's also air freight.
Yeah, no, that's true. No, not yet, Martijn.
That'll be your moonshot then.
That'll be my moonshot.
Thank you, Gert-Jan.
Pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Does Logistics Matter? For more on trends and innovations in supply chain and logistics, visit our blog on logisticsmatter.com. If you want to be a guest on this podcast, please send an email to podcast@logisticsmatter.com. This podcast was produced by Dimitry VleugelThe. The music is based on a sample by Ragaman and produced by Michael Spengler. This episode was supported by Rotate. Rotate helps airlines turn data into action and improve day-to-day commercial decision-making. Rotate combines state-of-the-art market data, cloud-based tools, and analytics with expert support and training. For more information, visit letsrotate.com.